started the
All right, so Abdul is gone.
citing.
All right, so I'm going to send Abdul the latest scan of emails so that. All right. Abdul's gone. All right. Thank you.
I can annoy the other side. Get this more data out of it.
Okay, the recording is on, everyone.
Any chance to get a motion on the one? Yeah, I know.
The numbers I see, Stephen Belsigno, you, Kim, are there any other members?
Yes, I've got your email. I actually have a couple.
That I didn't spot yet.
Good morning.
Nothing.
Good morning.
Oh, we can't hear you. You're on mute, Scott.
I am literally 2 inches shorter than I was 3 years ago. I had the doctor remeasure and said no, this was the
Yes,
I thought my kids were getting bigger, I was getting smaller.
that is true. I think it's a little bit of both for me. I wondered why my grandmother was like 4'9". I guess that's what I have to look forward to.
My grandmother was 101, and she was about 5 feet. I want another half an inch.
Wow. We don't have a quorum yet, folks. That's why we have not started.
Do certain things without quorums, you just can't do votes. What's in that book, Lee? Jesus.
Correct.
That's a big fat book.
It is.
Hello, Mr. Hamilton.
Good morning. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late.
You're the man of the hour. we have a quorum. All right. Let's get started then. Would you like to start the recording?
All right, we are recording.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Municipality Accountability Review Board. This is the subcommittee for the city of West Haven. Today is April the 26th. The time is 10:05. We do have a quorum. I'm Kimberly Kennison. I'm the designee for Secretary Beckham. And the only opening remarks I have for today is to let folks know that NBC is a guest today. I've noticed. Christine, thank you. Christine Shaw is with me, co-chair designee for Treasurer Wooden. Good morning, Christine. Any opening remarks?
No, other than good morning all, it's nice to see Mr. Jackson.
Hi,
Mayor
Rossi.
Hi, how are you?
Yes.
But I haven't seen Mr. Jackson.
No, I had the same comment. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of March the 22nd. If I could get a motion, please. Thank you, Christine. How about it? Thank you, Tom. Any discussion? I hear none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. All in favor, any opposed or abstain? Minutes have been approved. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is an update of the fiscal year 2021 audit. And I need to, sorry, we have a lot of people flying in right now. So I'm going to hold because one of them is a board member. Good morning, Mr. White. I need to give the members an update on the fiscal year 21 audit. I've been informed by Clifton Larson and Allen CLA that they have notified and have been in contact with the city, and they have withdrawn from their engagement with the city of West Haven, effective April the 21st. And under the Municipal Accounting Act, the city must appoint an auditor within 30 days prior to the fiscal year end. So that should have been 30 days prior to. And we do have fiscal year 22 coming right around the corner. Would the city like to comment on this item? On what their plans are?
Good morning. We have put out an RFP. We were notified in a 5-minute meeting. They didn't give a lot of details other than changes in West Haven. I can forward to you. They did a very brief statement afterwards. I did contact the secretary and let him know. And yes, the RFP is the RFP up?
I'm just waiting on one thing from the Board of Education. After this meeting, it'll be out
Okay,
this morning.
after this meeting, our new procurement director is waiting for one thing from the Board of Education, and then it will be up today, because we do realize that we need an audit firm, and we worked as quickly as possible. We didn't get a lot of notice. I mean, they called me, and I thought it was kind of a meeting of saying where the audit was going to be, so I was very surprised, and it was like a 5-10 minute meeting.
Yeah, they did describe that some focus for you to focus on your accounting records and forensic matters that are underway at the city. Another option that might be available for you, Mayor, to consider is that the state has on its website audit firms that have been competitively bid.
We've already looked at
And
that.
they
KPMG,
are
we've looked at that
on
one.
the state website that you could piggyback off of.
And we did look at that.
Okay.
The 10-day period is where we're looking, but depending on what the responses are, there are qualified firms. There are 2 of them that we can't use,
Right.
Co-Investment and CLA.
Right.
But the other, at least 2 of the other 3 would be suitable for a meeting, in my opinion.
Okay. Good.
Just a quick question. What's about you would make the positive response to the RFP?
Then the state has the right to, under statute, the right to hire the auditor on their behalf, and the city would then have to pay for the audit and all expenses. Any other questions? Yes, Christine.
If either Mayor Rossi or Mr. Jackson can clarify, did Clifton Larson begin to review, did they begin their audit for the last fiscal year and then decided to withdraw from that review? In other words, had they started the review of the city's records and just decided not to complete it?
The latter, Ms. Shaw, they started to put the pause on during the Cohen-Resnick audit, and then after the results of the Cohen-Resnick audit, they informed the mayor that they would be ending the engagement.
And a follow-up question, I understand some of the records that Clifton Larson had in connection with prior reviews of the city's records, that those notes and work papers were not available to Cohen-Resnick. Curious to know if the work that has been begun by Clifton Larson, will that be available to a new auditor so that they can have the benefit of some of their experience in review of the city's records?
That is, yeah, that is
New firm have to start from scratch.
right. So what we really put the shoulder to the wheel on was engaging another auditor. And then, once that is up, I intend to reach out to CLA, to request, whatever work papers are available.
So just to confirm, a new firm will begin a de novo review, a brand new review of the city's records once you retain.
I would expect that. I would expect that a new firm would want to, but I would also hope to be able to provide them some baseline from where CLA left off. They can choose to disagree with some of the analysis, but at least they know what's going on.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to review, discuss, and possible action on the labor contract for West Haven's Police Local 895. And this contract was provided at the MARB, but we did not touch upon it. This particular contract, the union has, it has an expiration on this particular contract for June 30th of 2023. The contract was reopened for salary negotiation between the city and the union. They've reached a tentative agreement, and that provides a retention incentive of $10,000 per person to extend through the contract of June 30th of 2025. The tentative agreement also provides wage increases of 2.5 each year for 3 years. And the timing of the submittal of the contract to the MARB was pointed out at the April 14th meeting, and that the city indicated that a waiver of the timeline would be obtained from the union in order to allow for the MARB to take action on this. We have received an email from the union, and it was received that they would agree to offer MARB the time to consider this, but no waiver was provided. The current plan is for the full MARB to consider this agreement at the next May meeting, which I believe is May 17th. Various background materials have been provided, including an update on the fiscal impact analysis and comparables. Also included in the materials is an email from the police chief responding to a request for data regarding turnaround and vacancies of the department over the last several years. The city's labor attorney, I see, is on the call today, and so I will ask him to please give us an overview of this contract and/or the city. Hi, Chris.
Mayor Rossi had approached me along with Chief Perno relative to the staffing shortages that the police department's been experiencing. Recruitment and retention has been difficult all over the state, but particularly so in West Haven, since their wages have not moved for quite some time. The opportunity presented by using the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds gave us the thought that we could negotiate with the union for a one-time increase and fund it out of those funds in year 1 and 2, which would basically put our hiring rate control near the top of our area and the top rate for patrol among the upper third. It also puts our command staff, lieutenants, sergeants, and captains, maybe in the upper half third, but again, it's something that the police chief really felt was needed, that it's a public safety issue, and that spirit we negotiated with the union. I don't know if Chief Perno has anything to add.
He said he's good for now.
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I noticed the so-called waiver letter from the union said it's okay for the MARB to look at it, but we're not raising our rights under 7-474, which I read and my eyes glazed over. not my area. What does that mean?
I'm not sure what the union meant by that. I think they would like to be able to assert that if MARB rejected the tentative agreement, that they would have some appeal right against the state. I'm not sure that there's any basis for that, since the MARB policies and procedures provide in section Roman numeral 1B3 that the chair can modify specific timelines for actions in the event of a fiscal exigency. Certainly that might be something that would apply here, since the city dropped the ball by not submitting it, and I'm sorry I didn't check on it sooner, to MARB. But MARB shouldn't be deprived of its opportunity to review a police contract change, especially of this magnitude. We're talking about $1.6 million in year one. So I think the union is just trying to preserve their rights, but we've all worked together. The union and the city are certainly on the same page for this, and they've been really good to work with.
May I have a follow-up? I know there's others that want to speak, but refresh my recollection as to why the ball was dropped and who dropped it. I know legal counsel is supposed to weigh in on some things, and I just want to know who was responsible.
I would just say Beth Sabo retired, and collectively we should have followed up from there.
Who's Beth Sabo?
She was our personnel director.
And she is in charge. I mean, on contracts, doesn't corp counsel need to say this meets all legal requirements?
Based on submitting it to the city council, which was done, but it was just not sent to MARB, and I'll take responsibility for not following up.
We understand that, so basically I don't have an answer as to who dropped the ball. Go ahead.
Hi,
Mark.
Yes, Mark.
First of all, let me start by saying that the documents that were sent to us, the fiscal documents, are in error. And therefore, I'm not even sure what's before us is accurate. I know it's not accurate. The previous document submitted to MARB last month is totally different than this one. Previous document had no movement on salaries, whereas this one has step advancement. So technically, had the MARB accepted the last contract or voted in favor of this at the last meeting, we would have been voting in favor on a document that was not accurate, and probably, I don't know as to the legality of its vote. But this document that's before us is inaccurate. Let me ask you, where are the 4 humane officers listed on this document, and why aren't they there?
What officers are you referring to?
There's 4 titled humane officers that were in a previous document that are not on this document. Why aren't they here?
I would have to defer to Chief Perno.
I'm not sure what document is
Yeah,
it.
I do see their name listed. I do see them listed on page 3, on page 11, Mark. Are you saying the titles are listed on page 11? But I do think there is an error in the dollar amount on page 11 for that particular item for a humane officer. I think that the salaries should be flipped. If you were to ask me, I think that the higher one belongs on A and the lower amount belongs on B.
There's step advancement. There's additional, there are additional staff added to the experience grid. Why?
When we corrected the wage impact at Julian's request, we were informed that the Patrol C officers in July 1, 2023 would move to B. So that was the largest impact.
No, I'm talking about you added a position, a detective position for next year.
normally when you're dealing, at least in my history, negotiations, when you're dealing with a salary grid, you don't have positions in the financial aspect. What information was given to the town council as backup material relative to the total amount of money? Because there are actually four different numbers. You have 1.6, now it says 1.3, then there's a 1.4. I don't even know what the hell I'm looking at here regarding total amount of increase. What was given to the town council relative to the wage increases and backup material when they voted?
Imagine the original spread. I was not at the meeting, I assume it was the original spreadsheet that was sent to Marb on April 11th.
Why did they extend the contract out 3 years rather than just adding $10,000 to the base for next year? Why did you, I mean, you have legacy costs that are quite troublesome that we've talked as a MARB for years, not only with West Haven but others. And why didn't you just take the $10,000 and add it to the base for next year to create a new base to negotiate off of? Why did you extend it out?
This certainly was an option. I think the thought was to provide the general wage increase that would be fair on top of that. And then the contract is done through June 30 of 2025.
Yeah, so there's no change to any legacy costs for another 2 years. Do you know what the ranking is for ability to pay for West Haven? Out of 169 pounds?
Oh, I imagine bottom 10.
Yeah, it's 161st. So obviously what you have here is and I agree. Let me say that I can read statistics along with everybody to know that the salaries are lower, if not the lowest in the area, in certain areas. I've asked for information relative to the salaries that the police officers have received over the past 2 years, because we know they get overtime into that. And in any city, fire and police are the highest paid individuals. I've yet to receive those to determine, what the actual salaries are for the individuals in the unit. How many vacancies are there presently?
Based at 121, we have,
Ask the chief that.
7 vacancies.
7. The chief said there are 7 vacancies.
So you're not counting the humane officers. You budget for 120. You count on this that the chief gave us 4 terminations, whatever terminations means this year. So assume there are 7 vacancies. You're saying there's 7 officer vacancies, because if you were to add the humane officers, you would get 117, which would be 3 vacancies. So I guess my question is, are the humane officers considered part of the cadre, or are they separate and apart from what you consider to be patrol individuals?
They're separate.
Totally separate.
The chief said they are separate, totally separate.
So the 120 staffing is budgeted. I guess then the question is, where are the other 4 people budgeted out of? That's,
they have their own.
Pick up any more time now. Getting back to the timeline. This agreement was signed on February 7th, and it was somehow presented by the mayor to the committee, to this ARPA committee, I guess on the 2nd of March. And then the board voted, the city council voted on the 14th. Why did it, the mayor made several comments about this committee that the Citizens Committee approving the ARPA expenditures. What would have happened, and this is theoretical, had the committee not agreed to the ARPA expenditures for the police contract, the $2 million?
Who's he asking that
I
to?
don't know. Are you directing that at the chief, at me, or?
The same.
Whoever this ARPA committee that was established by the mayor to authorize and agree to the ARPA expenditures. My question is, what would have happened if the ARPA committee, Citizens Committee, had said no to the police expenditure or allocation of $2 million of ARPA funding? What would the mayor have done then? Or what would have happened to this contract had the committee said no?
Well, this is all hypothetical, but I would have then looked to do it in the budget. I mean, we're in a serious situation with our police force, as we've just stated, and as everybody's pretty much agreed with. And we need police here. We definitely need, we don't need a transient police force. I know the council is backing it, and they were all for it. So if that happened, which it didn't, but if that happened, that's what we would have had to do.
Mr. Waxenberg, it's Scott. We had a robust conversation last night about such an item, and the council made it certainly clear that they understood their role, but they did want to know what the role of the commission was, and I responded that it was advisory. So they can advise with a negative recommendation, but ultimately action goes through the legislative, through the city council.
Right, because of their, and that was my concern, is that there's an impression that this committee has the authority to reject, and they don't. What are the vacancy rates in the surrounding communities? Hartford, we know, has a problem. They made a presentation, a very detailed presentation to MARB, and asked for concurrence on doing some incentives there. But there was a detailed presentation, and regarding exit interviews, etc. Has such a presentation ever been given, or just a recognition that what you have is a understaffed police force?
The Board of Police Commissioners conduct, the board conducts exit interviews.
When things like this happen so quickly, and one of those things where you take my word for it. I agree with the statistics that are before us regarding the salaries of these officers. I agree that the pension system is unique. Did anybody ever investigate a split system like the state has adopted in 2017 for the state workers to solve the pension, quote-unquote, pension problem that may exist for the police department?
Mr. Waxberg, Attorney Lee Kieran, Corporation Counsel. A couple things. First, Board of Police Commissioners hears about vacancy and turnover at every instance where there is vacancy and turnover, and each member, each individual officer that leaves has an exit interview, and those exit interviews are collected. Our exit interviews for people who leave often cite the better salary and benefit packages for other communities, including the pension. We have looked at a variety of pension scenarios. It looks like the most affordable for us is a bifurcated system that would provide some defined benefit through maybe the state Murphy Fund and retain some element of the 401k, because otherwise the buy-in is too rich concerning the city's current status. But we do know that that when we lose officers, and we lose officers, I think the chief will verify, generally before they hit their 5-year mark. When we lose officers, that's the main reason. But every time there's turnover, that is presented to the Board of Police Commissioners, and the Board of Police Commissioners have canvassed themselves individual officers who have left and why they leave.
The ARPA funding is for 2 years. Why did you decide to do it by saying, as I said, extending the contract rather than negotiating a full contract using the ARPA funds for the same purpose for next year? Why the necessity to reopen and extend and maintain the legacy costs, which are as burdensome to the town as other costs, rather than just taking the ARPA money that's available and using it for in its normal negotiations for next year?
Yeah, we're finding, Mr. Waxford, we're finding that the vacancy situation is in a crisis, and we look across the country and see a crisis. I know my son's a reporter in Spokane. He wrote an article about $15,000 bonuses for the Spokane Sheriff's Department. That's all across the country. We know that there's been problems with the state police. When you're at the bottom, when you see diminishing classes, the chief will tell you that the class he came in 40 some odd years ago was 800 to 1,000 people. They're getting classes of in the 80s. And the city of West Haven has to select from, used to be from the top, then became the middle, now it's from the bottom. So we believe we are trying to respond to an emergency as quickly as possible.
By your own statement, the emergency exists statewide, it's not nationwide, correct?
I just go by what I see in the media.
I guess my question is, an emergency today was an emergency yesterday as stated by the Hartford Police Chief. And as stated by you, etc., and the data that's shown by the chief himself who gave it to us. So this emergency has been occurring, and I agree, it's difficult and it's necessary to deal with. My question is the necessity to do it by adding, and it's not a $10,000 bonus. You added $10,000 to the base, then added 2.5%, which means the general wage increase is not 2.5% of the existing contract, it's over 3%.
2.5 and then the 10.
So it's when you add the money to the base that affects the salary. So it's misleading to say it's a 2.5% general wage increase. It's not. It's a 2.5% on top of
No, it's not.
a $10,000 base change.
It's the
The
reverse.
issue for me is the way it was done, not that it's done. The issue for me is the way it was done. I'm just seeking answers as to not the necessity to do it, but in the package form. And I'm going to stop there. I have several more questions.
Yeah, Mark, because we have a lot of hands up.
Is this all incorporated? Obviously, the document's wrong, that's before us. Is this money incorporated into the 5-year plan appropriately?
It will be.
We don't have a 5-year plan, so Mayor, I don't know if you have a 5-year plan or not, or Mr. Jackson.
No,
Yes, we are waiting for some actuarial responses so that we can appropriately record it. So we are amending the last 5-year plan that you saw, this being a primary driver of that.
Thank you.
That statement was incorrect.
I think I saw Tom
2.5% off
Hamilton
of the
first,
current.
even though he's fallen off the map
So-
here. So Tom.
Sure, thank you. I guess I have some questions and concerns that are sort of along the line of fellow board member Mr. Waxenberg. I don't think the material that was submitted provides a really clear and compelling case. Although I think that it's possible, likely perhaps, that if the data were compiled and arrayed in a way that was usable, perhaps we could make a very strong case that you need it. But I couldn't really even even find from the backup material what the current number of vacancies is and a history of those vacancies. We got one table that says terminations, which show that actually the number peaked in 2019 at 13 and has been going down since then. But I'm not quite sure I understand exactly what that table even represents and how many vacancies there are. So I think it would be helpful to have a clear understanding of total vacancies by calendar year or fiscal year going back for 5 years. The way that police staffing works in Connecticut, as certainly the chief and others know, is you have to get people into the police academy, and they're in the police academy for a long period of time. So to say that you haven't been fully staffed for a 5-year period, to me, doesn't really mean much. I don't think there's probably no police departments in the state or the country that are fully staffed for more than a very short period of time, because typically, the best you can do is perhaps get officers in a academy class once a year. So as soon as one person leaves, obviously there's always going to be attrition. You're always going to have some people retire, some people decide this line of work isn't for them, decide that they want to move to another part of the country or another department and so forth. So to me, it would really be helpful to have more data to make the case that in fact this crisis that you talked about is in fact really happening, and that number two, that West Haven is being so disproportionately impacted. So it would be nice to see some comparative data with other Haven County police departments. And that does also raise me, or bring me to the issue of the comparison that was presented. You included a comparison that had a bunch of different police departments around the state. I think it would have been helpful to have the police departments that are, in the immediate vicinity of West Haven. So really New Haven County, maybe down to Bridgeport, but you had included Norwalk and Stamford and Danbury in your comparison list. And Fairfield County salaries long have been, significantly higher than salaries in other parts of the state. I'm not sure that's really the best comparison. I think what would make the strongest case, in my opinion, is how do you match up with your immediate competitors in New Haven County, and seeing that data, I think, would be helpful as well. So again, I'm like Mark, I'm sympathetic. I am concerned about the impact on the long-term financial viability of batting this $10,000, but I am generally sympathetic to the notion that you need to be able to attract and retain staff. So, but I do have concerns with the material that's been presented and the lack of a strong case that I think needs to be made here.
Mr. Hamilton, your points are well taken. We will certainly follow up and provide additional data. I can say, as to the police department comparisons, typically we do wealth rankings in surrounding communities, so we'll go back and make sure that that is accurate.
I want to piggyback off of Tom, as you start to look back at your comparisons, and a few other things that I think should be added to that table, where it says, the budgeted numbers are 120. I think we should know what the real actual numbers were for the year. What was the head count every single year actual? And then, just because we have terminations, that doesn't tell me the turnover. So if you flip a position and you're just saying that, 15 or, 13 terminated, termination doesn't mean that you could have had 25 that flipped during that year. So your turnover rate is a little different than just saying how many people terminated. Scott, you know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what she's talking about.
I
Oh, I can't hear you.
I do.
Yeah.
I think, and Attorney Hodgson and I can talk about it a little bit offline, but we might need to pick, a date certain or 2 dates within any given fiscal year and get a head count for those items to then account for just the general turnover over the course of the year.
And then the other thing I would state is that attrition. Everybody, you always have a vacancy, so you can see that you're budgeted for 120, and that yet I'm hearing the actuals are coming in at 112. So therefore, you have I'm thinking it could be automatically that your vacancy rate is always, close to 8 bodies, 7 to 8 bodies. So I don't know if you build that into your budget knowing that just based on the turnover, I will always have 8 positions vacant. Then that doesn't warrant to me the crisis because you're living that way right now. Maybe you need to go higher than 112, I don't know. Or higher than 120 because of the vacancies. But I'll stop there. I just wanted to comment about that table because I do agree it is definitely incomplete. Christine, and then after that, Stephen, and I see Patrick as well.
Thank you, Ms. Kennison. So I have a specific question related to the impact analysis, the wage impact. Just curious to know why there's a change in the ratio between total officers A and C. If you could just comment on that briefly.
I didn't hear the question. Change in officers A to C.
The contract, they move up a step
Okay.
based on years of service.
All right. And my second comment relates to, thank you for that, just as a procedural matter, I'm not sure if we can proceed given the number of questions around the information that's submitted to us now and how it compares with information submitted previously to the MARB. So I join my fellow board members in the supporting the request for additional information and clarification. This has nothing to do with the wisdom of moving in the direction of paying police officers more competitive salaries. I think it's an essential step for the city to take. But we have to set aside for ourselves that we understand the fiscal impact of these total wage increases. So I don't know if we should table this matter, Ms. Kennison, and take this up. And this also does underscore, not to beat a dead horse, but it does underscore the wisdom of bringing MARB in to ask these questions before these contracts are executed. So I would just underscore that process is one that needs to be followed. So is this something that we can table? I know that our agenda is pretty
It is. I think it might be helpful though at first to get all the questions out, Christine, so that they can take them away and get us that information. If Stephen would like to add to that, and Patrick, because they've been waiting.
Sure. Thank you. I agree. I think a lot of the information was, in my view, misleading. I can say that because I was a police commissioner in the town of Woodbridge, so a much smaller group of officers for 19 years, and I cannot remember a time that we ever had full staffing for police officers. So say that you're setting short out of the amount that you have, I think is an exceptionally small percentage, and I'm sure that the chief has been, with his experience, been able to mitigate the staffing that and utilize the staffing that he has. So I find it troubling to have a 20% increase. I think that's a lot
$72,000 doesn't seem to be unreasonable. In New Haven County, Fairfield County might be a very different situation. So I think what we need to do is take the surrounding towns, New Haven County town, and see exactly where you are, because obviously that's where you're going to be drawing from police, somebody from Greenwich, you're going to be coming to West End and go to work. So I think that these are some of the issues that have to really look at. There's some information I would need to be able to make, to be able to vote up or down on that.
Patrick?
Thank you. Yeah, so, when I was looking at this, looking at the prior information that was provided, I kind of did take into account that there must be some movement with some of these folks, understanding it the way I looked at it, inclusive of other expenditures that come with wages. I figure in the out year, you're looking at $2.6 million, somewhere around that line. I would assume that in the 5-year plan that will be submitted to this board, that the mayor's office has accounted, or will account for the increase in that particular line item. What I find unfortunate is that, so we have a bunch of city employees, certainly our police officers. I think they are underpaid, certainly looking at the current salary structure. I find that the new salary structure is competitive and it will stop some migration, but it also, I think there's a greater thing to just folks coming in and getting trained and leaving to other communities. I think it's, when people feel valued, they just perform a different level of work, and in policing, I think that's certainly important to take into account how the folks who are staying here kind of keep grinding it out and doing the dangerous job that they do. I would say that I'm not quite sure any action today or delayed action actually means anything. It was represented to us that there was an agreement to waive the timelines. That was a clear representation from the city's council at our April 14th meeting. It seems by Attorney Walsh's email and Attorney Hodgson's representation of that clearly the union is not on the same page with the representation from the city's corporation council on April 14th. It is concerning that this was TA'd back in February. I don't know when Ms. Sable retired. Attorney Hodgson, do you know?
Yeah, before that.
That's for sure. It's unfortunate that didn't come up to us, but of course we dealt with 7 service contractors that didn't come to us either in time. I would be in a position to support this, but due to the lack of correct information or the information that just came before us, I understand the hesitancy of my colleagues on the board, and it's unfortunate that that the police officers will continue to whatever degree to sit and wait to see what our decision is. Although, personally, for us, that should be seen. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. All right, so it looks today for this agenda item that we're looking for some additional information and probably some updates to this TA. I think that there is some grammatical errors. My guess is definitely on page 11. Also, I think you want to remove Beth Sabo's name from page 57 as a signatory. And
Hey, Kim, if I might, Kim?
Who is this?
Mark.
Yes, Mark.
From a legal perspective, maybe legal counsel that's present can comment, or we may need Garrett to comment from the OPM. I'm not even sure that if MARB were to accept or reject or take no action, it's, you have a tentative agreement, you're under MIRA. I think that MARB has a role to play, but in reality, this is a done deal, or am I inaccurate in that assumption? And if you don't have a definitive answer, I can understand that, but I guess the question is, assume for a second that MARB were to, worst case scenario, reject this. I'm not sure that that has any bearing on the final result, just adds to a step to get to the end result, which is a tentative agreement between the city and its police department. Am I accurate in assuming that? I'm just trying to go reflect in my mind what the MARB statute says, but I don't think that MARB can prevent the enactment of a collective bargaining agreement. It can object to it and reject it.
We can reject it.
But in the end, our rejection doesn't negate, the question is, so what?
Well, so what? But the city is in non-compliance over an oversight board, and then we're saying that every time they decide not to provide anything, that they can go forward, and that's not why they're under our oversight.
Okay, and I understand that.
As a tier 3, they have a requirement to provide us with these contracts for approval or for rejection, right?
Right, and the question I have is, if it were to be rejected, they could go to arbitration, and if an arbitrator rules, if they play the game of submitting the same proposal, then it's, for all intent and purposes, the arbitrator has ruled. We reject the arbitrate agreement, which we can do up to 2 times, if I get them off the side of my memory. Then after that, it's implemented. So, maybe this is a conversation for somebody to have, to share with the MARB people as to what the end result may or may not be based on our acceptance. Acceptance is easy, but based on our rejection, it just appears to me that even if MARB were to reject, the end result could and would be the same
This is going to send
of the tentative agreement, and that would be a legal interpretation.
So what?
Not for us to
What's my
discuss here, it's just a question, I guess. Thank you.
So Chris, I think you have your takeaways and your homework of additional information that we need.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And if you're able to provide that ahead of time, we will get this out to the MARB and look to bring this forward to the next meeting. But if we don't have everything, then that would be another situation. Mr. Hamilton, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I would also ask that Jackson provide us with a preliminary estimate of the impact on the 3-year plan and the 5-year plan and the mill rate as part of that additional backup documentation coming back to the board.
Will do, Mr. Hamilton, or I will give it my best shot. I'm not entirely sure on an actuarial basis how it affects ADEC, so there's going to be wiggle room in that, obviously, but I will do my best to do that, sir.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. No other questions on this item? And I just made a mess of my papers. Here we go. Okay. Nick?
Do we need a motion?
Oh, yes, I think.
To do anything?
It was a motion it was to review or discuss or possible action. It wasn't a requirement. And we're choosing not to take any action right now because the information is incomplete. So the next item on the agenda is discussion and is to review and discuss a possible action on the mayor's 2023 recommended budget. The subcommittee has been briefed a little bit on the budget for March, at the March meeting, but we didn't get enough time to be able to go through the plan. You'll see that Julian has written up a nice summary for us. I'm going to ask Julian to touch base on some of those highlights that he has incorporated in his review of the budget. Julian?
Sure. The summary document, or the OPM review of the budget that was included in the meeting materials is the same summary that was provided at the last subcommittee meeting, with the exception that fire and sewer funds have been incorporated into it, so it covers the entirety of the budget now. We also included a series of questions that were provided to the city last week that focused largely on the expenditure side of the budget. We did note, just kind of getting into some of the sort of high-level themes in the budget, we did note that operating expenses increased by a considerable amount, almost 11%. So we did take a close look at all the departmental expenses. Some of the increases explained by some of the new positions that we see in the budget, and also know that recognize some of those positions as ones that have been recommended by the MARB in response to audit findings or other operational improvements. But looking at the departments in closer detail to understand what is driving the majority of that increase, sort of resulted in a long list of questions. We did receive the city's initial response to those questions, which was distributed yesterday evening, and I know that work continues on addressing some of those. But as you go through the responses that we received, you'll note that there appear to be some cases where the city may be able to pull back on some expenditure items, or at a minimum revisit them, such as the health insurance. Taking another look at data from Lockton and recalculating those numbers. So there appears to be, based on partial response, some possibility for movement there. One of the other items that was also noted in the budget overview is the change relative to each of the previously approved 5-year plans regarding fund balance. In each of the 5-year plans, FY23 was kind of a pivotal year in that a large contribution to fund balance was planned to coincide with a drop-off in debt service, and the numbers ranged from plan to plan, but in the most recent plan, that set aside for fund balance approximated $4 million. That is not present in the current budget as proposed. We did get an explanation to a certain extent in the document that was sent out last night from the city. It sounds like the FY21 results sort of obviate the need for as large a transfer, but of course those are not final results. We don't have audited results. A large piece of that is contingent on the final expenditure numbers for the Board of Ed. So it sounds as though there's a plan in place for maintaining progress towards fund balance, but it has not been sort of documented or memorialized in the budget itself or in an updated 5-year plan. There also appear to be some changes in the assumptions going forward for debt service. The total debt service requirements in 23 don't appear to align with either projections in the last 5-year plan or in the projections that were part of the last bond issue. So I know the city is still working on sort of unraveling what all is built into that. But that was a significant swing. And then lastly, again, a lot of these are relating back to the 5-year plan. The contribution to the fire pension is significantly short of what was laid out in last year's plan. Board members will remember that as we were finalizing the 5-year plan, the city was in the process of updating its pension valuation for the Allentown Fire Pension Plan. There were some assumption changes that were being incorporated into the new valuation, which were expected to have a net favorable impact on future ADEC requirements. And they did in the final valuation. And the plan was to sustain a very aggressive level of funding for the pension plan, well in excess of the projected ADEC requirements. And as a way to sort of accelerate progress on the plan's funded ratio, the budget as proposed does include funding in excess of the ADEC for the fire pension fund, but it is considerably less than what was laid out previously. And so in terms of sort of higher level policy considerations in this budget, those are the major items that stood out. And then, as I mentioned, I think the city is still working on addressing some of these other questions, largely around the expenditure side of the budget. But those are the highlights that I wanted to make sure the board was aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Bob White, I see your hand is up first, so go.
Gotta be quick here. Thank you very much, Julian. I think the one thing that comes out of that report is there is no way that we should be considering this budget without a five-year plan. And that applies to the police contract as well. At least for me, those are non-starters. And I know there may be a messed up timeline, but we have to deal with that. I do have, a couple of questions. One is on the revenue side. One of the unanticipated deviations for the five-year plan is you got more pilot money than you thought. I'm wondering if you can tell us where that money went. What particular areas? Second, I understand but may be mistaken, that ARPA funds are not in this budget. And I don't know if I know the mayor gave us a general overview of buckets for ARPA money, but I'm wondering in FY23 how much of that is to be spent, because I think when we look at the five-year plan, we need to know what is, what has been funded and is now going to be part of the city budget, or else will be dropped. At least I haven't seen that easily, but that's going to be critical for analyzing both this year's budget and the five-year plan. One small personnel thing, not small thing, is I noticed that a finance director has been hired. Scott, I didn't know if you were permanent or interim.
You're beeping in and out, Mr. White.
I am permanent for as long as the good people of West Haven will have me.
Oh, my goodness, okay. That's good. Thank you.
Can I respond at least to the ARPA question for Mr. White?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, right now, just so that you're aware, the council actually has control of the ARPA funding right now, and they are working through it. But you're absolutely correct, no, it is not in the budget at this point in time. Nothing has been expended yet, and in fact, they were taking up some things, I believe, last night. But again, I haven't seen that they have done any spending. So I will be in contact with the chair and the finance chair and make sure that, if anything else, if there's any new information, that we bring it forward to the next meeting. Like if they, to your point, expend any authorized expenditures or anything at all like that.
Thank you.
Is the city involved, or are you stating that ARPA funds are being totally handled through city council?
The way we handled it, and my understanding was from the beginning, we followed it similar to our budget process. So I had my due diligence in the beginning, had several meetings, spent a lot of time crafting a plan, and now what they are doing is the city council is presiding over it, and they're taking it kind of more piece by piece or a few pieces, like they're not looking at the whole plan, it looks like at once, and deciding what they do want to do, if there's anything that they want to tweak or anything at all like that. But they are moving forward. I know that they are looking for RFP, RFQ for an architect, an accounting firm, so that we have additional staffing, because it's $29 million, and there is going to be a lot of work associated with distributing that $29 million.
Correct, and we didn't get a completed plan, correct? So when it's done, that has to come back to us.
Right, for review. My end is completed. In other words, you're looking for the end result once they actually vote on it, because right now it's still like the budget in process.
Right.
So I will let them know, and we'll bring it back to you.
Okay. And one of the questions I'm going to ask is, at that time, who is going to manage these? Who is managing the funds? Who is managing the expenditures? Who is making sure that we have the proper documentation for audits?
That's what I said, we're going to hire an outside accounting firm, and that's what they are looking for. They've already put out RFPs, RFQs for different things. We're going to get a lawyer involved, accounting firm, and I want to say there was somebody else. There was another prong to that, but they have already. Architect, thank you, architect. And so we did leave, or I did leave, and they, so far I've left it to, I want to say like $700,000 of the money to be able to finance and pay for these folks.
If I can add to that, we're also building up a grants support unit. So that will be the liaison between the departments and the professionals at the mayor's departments.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hamilton, your question?
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at the position requests, and obviously the ones that are centered in the finance area we spent a long time talking about, and so I don't want to belabor that, but I did want to hear the rationale for I guess it's 5 positions here that I see: police captain, traffic record clerk, secretary of Parks and Recreation, health educator, and a sanitarian. I don't know if the last 2 perhaps are related in any way to COVID, and so they're not using COVID funding for those positions. Might make sense, but I'd like to hear generally the rationale for those 5 positions.
Okay, well, I can start with the police captain. I know that firsthand because I was brought in by the chief and some of the commission. And because of the implementation of the body cameras, dash cams, the FOI request, they did establish the captain's position. Years ago, they used to have 4 captains. It went down to 3 captains over time, then it went down to 2. But in sight of the new laws and the requirements, the chief and the board of police commissioners and also the city council approved a plan to have a captain in charge of that, to take care of all of the nuances and everything we're going to deal with body cameras and dash cams and I guess taser cams and all of that. Does that answer the police captain question, or do you want me to get the chief or anything else?
Yeah, I just wonder if I don't know what your command structure, command rank looks like. I know I've been in some places where when departments have added one type of position, then they have a designated another type. So I don't know, how many sergeants you have, or how many lieutenants, if any, you have, and so forth. But did you look at whether or not there was an ability to do a substitution in this sort of case or not?
No.
Chief?
Yes, we did an entire new division called Accreditation and Standards, which incorporated the body camera mandates, dash cams, etc.
Can you hear him, Mr. Hamilton? Could you hear the chief?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay.
Right, so I guess my question, Chief, is whether or not, and again, I don't know your police department well enough to know how many, what your total command staff is, but did you look at whether or not there was any opportunity to reduce one somewhere else in order to find the captain position?
Our lieutenants are shift commanders, and they are, 5 of them take care of the shifts around the clock. The other 2 captains had more than enough on their plate. With the bill that was passed and the added duties that are being pushed onto police departments through the implementation of the cameras, etc., we found it the only way that we would get it done without having something fall through the cracks was to have a professional standards and accreditation division, which would be the focal point for all of those added responsibilities. That could not go on the current 2 captains, so we had a presentation before the city council for a 3rd captain for that division. And in doing so, we looked at shuffling other ranks and positions around, and it just was a trickle effect as far as losing the accountability and responsibility added to those other ranking positions, and it wasn't really effective.
Okay, thank you. And is the traffic record work also under your department, Chief?
That's
and
one
so
of.
can you explain the rationale for that position?
Is that the one that is zeroed out for salary?
We're not seeing that, we only have a notation in the documents that we have.
There's no added.
This might help spark memory.
Yeah.
If I'm right on this, it looks like there was a swap out between a computer operator and the traffic records position in the department.
I believe that may have been, we have no added civilian staffing. We shuffled some of our current staffing. We took one of the civilian staff and we put that person into that accreditation and standards division to assist in the documentation and record keeping. So we have sworn officers as well as a civilian in that to take care of all of the FOI requests and the documentation of the camera, both dash and body worn, as well as the accreditation that is mandated.
Okay, thank you, Chief. I think that does answer the question there. Just to confirm that, if I'm hearing correctly, there's only one net new position in the police department next year, which is the police captain position. Is that correct?
That went into effect in January because we have to have all of the camera systems, et cetera, implemented by July 1st, 22.
Okay, so that was a mid-year add, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. And I guess back to either the mayor or Scott Jackson, can you just briefly address the secretary at Parks and Recreation and the 2 health department positions?
The secretary, I know that the director of Park Rec had asked for an additional position because of additional, programs coming on now that even though we still have a high positivity rate, we are trying to do more programming than we did in the middle of COVID. So he did ask for that position. The sanitarian, I haven't been able to get in touch with the director of health as far as, now you called it a health educator, but I see a sanitarian and public health nurse, but that's always been there. So I will double check with her, and then I can send everybody, the answer together in an email.
Okay, I don't know, Julian, if you've got any other information on either of those.
I'd have to dig into some of the detail that not off the top of my head.
Okay, well, if we can get a little more detail later, that would be helpful for me. Thank you, I think that's it for me for now.
Thank you.
Sure, if I could add just one quick thing to that. What I think we're trying to do here in West Haven is create value where perhaps some residents have thought that that value was slipping. And so these are the specific requests from elements of the West Haven community as to what would make them prouder to say that they were from West Haven. The sanitarian is obviously related to the where it can't be disassociated from the health crisis. But it is possible to take a look at other ways of financing that position.
And while, one other thing before I forget again, when Bob White had talked about like where the money and everything went, the police ADEC increased this year by a little bit over $1.2 million, so that did take some of the additional funding that we had, whether you want to call it in pilot or wherever it did revenue stream. And I will look to the rest of it, and again, most of City Hall is getting a 2% raise, and then there will be the 2.5% for the police department. So that is part of it as well. On the good note that Julian had mentioned, and it's like the last question of the set that I brought up, this year, for FY21, the Board of Ed had favorable results. So what happened was that was turned back over to the city and went immediately to our fund balance. So we are ahead, they had 2.5, and this is, of course, is all unaudited. I want to be very, very clear about that, unaudited. So now the city general fund is now $6.1 million unaudited as of the end of FY21. That's ahead of, if it stands with an audit, it's ahead of the 5-year plan assumption of $4.3 million. So I just wanted to let the review board know that as well.
Mayor, can I make a...
Tell me that number again, Mayor.
The total number, Kim?
Yes, please.
Okay, 6.1.
6.1.
That's what it went to, and 3.5.
From the Board of Ed?
Yes, from the Board of Ed. But as I said, it's unaudited, and I agree, until we have an audit, that's the only way, a signed, sealed, and delivered audit, that's the only way you're 100% sure.
Right.
Did Chief did you want to say something else, Chief?
If it's allowable.
If it's allowable, he'd like to know if he could speak.
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Joe Perno. I've been with the police department for over 40 years, and I'm currently chief. And I just wanted to, I don't know the members of the board that well, but one board member said that the 10,000 was added first to the salaries and then the 2.5% increase. That's incorrect. The 2.5% increase is based on the current salaries of the officers, and then the $10,000 is added onto each rank. So that was specifically done because the 2.5% was already negotiated by the current CBA. As far as the retention, we've been budgeted for 120 for forever. And we've reached that for a 2-month period in 2020. And then it bounced down to probably in the area of 113, 115. And being able to get officers to replace that, we are a small department, I would consider, with big problems. We have officers that are on military leave, we have officers that are injured, we have officers that are on field training, and those officers are counted in the number, but they're not counted in who I can use. So who we could use is probably down into the 102, 104 range. And as far as the TA, we had, prior to the TA, we had 7 officers take a regional testing in Fairfield County. And that would have devastated this department, losing all 7. We train our officers, and the departments that get a lateral from West Haven are getting an extremely well-trained officer. And we have been told that from the departments that they have gone to. And you're absolutely correct. We cannot compete with the salaries of the Fairfield counties, your Stanfords, your Greenwich, your Westports. We can't go to that level on our salaries, but we can try to keep the officers here by telling them that you will do police work, and we allow them to do police work, and that's what they look for. So if you get an officer that's coming here, and they know right off the bat that they're not going to get paid the higher amount, but they want to do police work, then those are the officers that we want, and we want to keep. We have officers right now that are in the 7-year range, and then we have officers in the 20-year range. But we have a huge void in that 10 to 20 year of tenure, and that's going to come out and it's going to hurt us in the years to come, maybe at the end of this TA in the year 2025. So that's something that has to be considered, and it's an intangible that really can't be put on paper to be understood as far as data. But when you live it every day and you see it, it's something that is very, very concerning. And I just need this board to understand that. We are very concerned about the impact that not having officers is going to have on this community. It's an absolute public safety issue. And I know that the officers here, those that are staying with us, understand that we are 110% behind them, and we'll do everything that we can to keep them here. But we need your help. And that's the bottom line. We need your help to understand what we are facing every day. We're not Hartford, we're not New Haven, but we face the same problems at a more magnified degree because we are a smaller department. So I thank you for your time, and if there's any questions, please feel free to contact me.
You did mention one thing that I think could be helpful, and I don't know if Chris Hodges has this information. You did mention the age of your workforce, and that would be the steps that they would take in order to move forward. I think that when you provide the data back to us, it would be helpful to know how many people do you have in each classification. You know, the sergeants, the captains, and give us your pool, and also what step are they in? How many bodies are in each one of those? Because you're mentioning this void, but I think that would be very good information for this group to know.
Kim, that's already given to us.
It is? Okay.
Yeah, the FTEs, they gave us an FTE salary account. And getting, again, looking at that FTE salary account, the humane officers are missing, which means the whole thing is somewhat inaccurate. If I can just briefly state as to the 2.5%. The current salary, according to what I'm looking in front of me, is $72,410 for Patrol Officer A. 2.5% of that would equal up to roughly $84,200 Next year's salary is $84,471. So, it's above the $10,000 increase. So, the numbers that the chief just stated don't match the FTE. That's all I'm going to say. They can look at it. They can look at what they gave us. But the numbers don't match, and I think that's the concern. The concern is not giving help. The concern is the numbers given to us don't match. And
I don't know what number she got.
unfortunately, that ties at least my hands from making what I consider to be a decision in the best interest of West Haven. So with the right numbers, the right decisions will be made. Thank you.
Christine, I see your hand is up, and I see Patrick is waiting. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Tennyson. I have some questions about the ADEC, and specifically reference is made in the materials to some of the figures being tentative because the actuarial valuation has yet to be completed. And I'm referring to the information related to the fire pension fund. Do you have a sense of when that final valuation will be available and these numbers confirmed?
I don't know for the fire department because it normally goes directly to their, but I will get a copy of it. I know for the city, the actuarial study has been done, and as I said, the ADEC went up a little over $1.2 million for that. So again, that is what I used for the budget for the city.
And just as a follow-up, there is a long list of matters to attend to, Mr. Jackson, and among those on the list is a discussion of the merits of consolidating the management of the pension funds of the fire districts. I know that I had some conversations with your predecessor around just identifying some consulting advice, consultants that could help the city frame those opportunities or identify the opportunities for savings in collaboration with the fire districts, recognizing that we don't have any explicit oversight of those districts. But it strikes me as a matter that ought to be elevated to one of the near-term priorities. I know we need to address some of the issues around the retention of an auditor and the other issues related to COVID relief funds. But I press this point because reference is made to the driver of the increase in the city's contribution into ADEC as attributable to a reduction in the investment return assumption, which I think is actually the right thing to do to more accurately capture what we expect the investments to earn. But importantly, there is a kind of a general reference to extending the amortization period, which is a tactic which I'm sure you've seen before can elevate the overall cost to the city in the long term. So I want to underscore my continued interest and the continued interest of the subcommittee. I'm really exploring ways in which there can be a real close look at the pension liabilities and the extent to which the city could avail itself of some economies of scale, really examine its investment program, and because the significant increase in the ADEC is of some concern. So I just want to kind of put that out there for future discussion.
I appreciate it. Actually, Mr. Malone and I discussed it early this morning about what a structure might look like for a consolidated delivery. And I know it came out late last night, but in the two-page I sent over, there is some reference to a conceptual plan of a true consolidation of the Guardian plans with essentially an investment manager overseeing fund managers specializing in various asset classes. benchmarking them against the appropriate indices, and reporting out on a monthly basis to provide the decision-making board, this composite board of recommendations to take under advisement as to how to modify allocations, or if a fund is performing well below the index, they can make a recommendation for modifying that fund manager, or just that sort of regular financial review, which I'm not sure happens in any specific way right now.
I'm glad to hear it's on your task list. Thank you. I did not see that additional submittal, and I will look for it. But thank you, Mr. Jackson.
All right, Christine, that's it? Your hand is still up, but you're finished? Yes, okay. Patrick, please.
Yeah, I have a few questions. Just for my recollection, do restructuring funds that were allotted for fiscal 21?
Yes.
We have not distributed them yet to the city?
No, they're in compliance with that MOA.
And that total number that we still have retained is what?
4 million.
And is that 4 million part of the projected surplus of that $6 million number that we spoke about a few minutes back?
Should not be.
Okay. The other question I have is just back to the position with the captain, and this may be answered by the chief specifically. You said there was another division created within the department to handle records requests, which inclusive of your basic FOI and the body cam footage and whatnot, and that there is other sworn and civilian positions under that captain's position?
We didn't create another position, we just moved a civilian from one area to another. We took her responsibilities for crime analysis and we put her into the accreditation section of this new division, because accreditation is crucial.
Okay, is there, and outside of the captain and the civilian, is there any other sworn or civilian folks in that area?
We have the captain.
Under that captain?
Yes, we have the captain and we have 2 sworn officers.
And is there a particular reason why it was a captain's rank as opposed to, say, sergeant or lieutenant that was chosen?
Making the division, we have a lot of things that are under him now. We revamped the entire organizational chart of the police department. We put records under this new division, which records was mostly shared. We put our hiring in there. We have our training is now under another captain. One of the 2 that were there prior to this making of the 3rd, and now they can, recruitment and training can be basically a little bit more dealt with because of the crisis that we're undergoing.
Okay, so this captain, this newly created position, are you saying, I'm just trying to understand this, oversees more than just the records? They do recruitment training and those things, or those are under other captain ranks?
The new captain basically is with our accreditation and our standards. He takes care of all of our general orders that are daily being updated through new mandates through the state. We have, once the implementation of the body cameras and dash cameras are in, we'll probably, and I guarantee we'll get inundated with FOI requests through outside sources as well as the court system. The accreditation is something that has been lacking. We've basically just done what we had to do, but now with the new bill, we may have to go to the Polio level, which is both expensive as well as time consuming.
Okay. All right, moving on. This is just for further clarification for when we revisit the police contract with some updated information from the city and from Attorney Thompson. Going back to Mark's point and what the chief responded to, in the first year where Patrol Officer A is at $84,471, I think Mark's feeling was that there was $10,000 added and then the 2.5% raise put on that, and I believe the chief responded that the 2.5% raise was put on prior to adding the 10,000. So the number itself, 84,471, is actually represents adding the 10,000 to the 72,410 and then adding the 2.5% wage increase. If that is supposed to be what the agreement is, because the chief kind of said that it's not that way, and it is, but if the chief's recollection of what was negotiated is different than what's represented in front of us, with that 84,471 number should be corrected. I'm just trying to figure out which one it is, so when we have this discussion again, we can have the accurate number, because as I said, this number reflects the 10,000 added and then 2.5% put on top of that. But if it's not that way, obviously it's a couple $100 less. To that end, we get, obviously these things are very important issues, the budget. There's a lot of other matters and information that needs to come forward. We're doing this, we don't have a completed audit yet. That should have been completed back in December. We don't have that. And, we received some documents last night. I would assume that's because Julian received them approximate to yesterday sometime, and it got forwarded to us for a meeting today. And I can tell you, we cannot continue, with all the documentation that the folks on this board have to review to really get into the critical information needed to determine whether the budget makes sense and how it works within multiple things, including a 5-year plan. We really have to have submissions to OPM and certainly then to us in a much more timely manner. I personally don't think I agree with Mr. White that I'm not in a position to take any action regarding any budgetary items today because we just don't have complete documents in front of us.
Chief, if I may, I can assure you that the calculations for the salaries was made with the 2.5% first, and then the $10,000 additional, and then the 2.5% for the following 2 fiscal years. I can assure you that that is the intent and how it was written. What documentation and calculations you have in front of you, I can't speak to, but I can tell you that that was the intent and the spirit of that tentative agreement.
Thank you, Chief, for that clarification. I would just, it should be then noted that this document should be should be corrected to reflect that. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
I'd like to just respond to one thing with the questions, Mr. Egan, just so that you are aware. I did turn in my budget right after I gave it to the City Council. By charter, I had to present it by the 3rd Thursday. I did that. It was St. Patrick's Day, March the 17th. March the 18th, I did send it over to the MARB board, and I understand, again, everybody is very, very busy, and I get that, but I did not receive those questions back until a month afterwards, until 4:18 and late in the day. So I have done my absolute best, because I agree with you. I sat on the City Council. I understand exactly what, you go through with all the paperwork, and you don't want it like dropped in your lap right before a meeting, because it's hard to do follow-up questions. I did my best, and there are still a few questions. I'm going to continue to work on it. So if anybody, though, has questions on this board ahead of time, everyone has my email. The sooner you don't get it to me, the sooner I'll be able to get it back for you, so that there is a lot of back and forth, because we are running out of budgetary time as far as the council goes. They're charter-driven to have a budget in place, either voted on or by default by the first Monday or first Thursday in May, which would be May the 5th, which is fast approaching. And I am aware of, there are a few, errors in the budget that we will be correcting, that I'm going to go through and work on tomorrow. So we are going to make sure that we have get everything together. But I did want to make everyone aware of that. It wasn't that, we were hanging around. We were very much, I tried very hard. A couple of departments weren't available. I know the city clerk was at a conference all week, so I will get the additional information to all of you. And as I said, I know when I was on the council, I used to have follow-up questions. So if there's any follow-up questions, the answer I provided, please send them directly to me, and I'll get them to you as soon as possible.
We want to keep them also copied to our staff rather than just straight direct, Mayor, so that we have a central repository.
Oh, yeah, I put Julian and you usually on everything, so I should say that.
And everything comes through Julian is the best way to do that. In addition, I think that, we are prepared to be able to do this, but I think some of the items that are going to be critical is going to definitely be the police. The second thing is going to be the 5-year plan. And Mayor, you noted some conversation with where you think that your numbers are going to come out as of fiscal year 21. Mr. Jackson, you did give us a copy of the budget to actual for the month of March, but there isn't a summary or anything attached with that. And so the mayor's referring to something that will tell us where you're going to end your year. That we would need to be provided as well, Mayor.
And you're talking about for FY 21, you're talking about him? As far, that, I'm talking about the, again, unaudited fund balance from the, from the results of operation favorable from the Board of Ed. That changed it.
Right, so can you submit an updated copy? Sorry, go ahead, I know
What I sent over was just because we didn't have financials at the last meeting.
I understand.
The board sort of a snapshot of where we were straight out of Munis.
Okay. But in the future, we will get a summary instead of, I appreciate getting all the detail, but it's too much for us to go through. If we could have the summary as it was presented in the past.
Okay.
Okay. And Mayor, were you going to send over a revised copy of 21?
A revised copy of, I have.
Of your unaudited 21 that you referred to today with changes.
In what format? I'm not, in other words, a budgetary one, because what I have is what came out of Munis and what it shows as far as, overall. I can send you that. That shows that it's 6.1 unencumbered right now.
Yeah, so we can have that for our records with the changes.
Absolutely.
I know that Mr. White has patiently been waiting. Sorry, Mr. White.
I am so patient. I've been on this board for 4 years.
Wait, no, you were the first one to get out and ask a question. You're in the second round. Okay.
All right. Well reviewed. Actually, I actually agree with Pat that I don't think we're going to be able to deal with the budget until we get one information. But I have two logistical questions. One is, I think a lot of us, certainly I am, looking at the budget in light of the 5-year plan and the general fund. The plan spends money rather than, the budget spends money rather than puts it into the general fund. And the rationale for that is we did better than expected in fiscal year 21. But that is unaudited, and as we just learned today, the process of getting it audited is going to take a while. What do we do? I mean, obviously, if there's any big swings in 21, then that's an issue. I don't have an answer, but I want to put it on the table because I know this budget's got to get approved in time for tax bills to go out. And what was the deadline? Did you say the 5th, Mayor, or was that something else?
No, that is the council, the charter mandate for the council to either pass a budget or it has to go in by default. There's also 3 fire districts out in town, because they're under the city, goes with the same as the council. They will pass or go by default. Both of the fire districts have their own meetings for voting. My understanding is that the center district will be looking to approve their budget on May the 2nd, and they're going to do that as a virtual meeting. I have not heard from West Shore. West Shore usually is the last one to come in, and they usually don't get their stuff together because they actually have an I call it old-fashioned because it's the lever machines voting for either yay or nay for the budget. That usually happens later in May. So that's the time frame that we're looking at as far as all the districts.
Okay. So bottom line though, and I don't have the answer, is how do we deal with passing this budget, passing the police contract with a surplus that may or may not have occurred in 21. I just don't know, and I'll just leave it there. The second is at the last, I know this is not on the agenda, but I know at the last general meeting, we had, I think, 7 non-labor contracts for review. They're not here. I don't know when we'll do that. And I think there were more in the pipeline. So number one, I guess I'd like a response on that. And the second, which is related, is that in the Cone Resnick report and in discussions by this board, the notion of updated disclosure statements by city officials and those required to produce them were quite outdated. And I would ask the city what their plan is to update those, and I would encourage them to do it quickly because, you know, that kind of finding and the potential of conflict of interest, I think, undermines confidence in city government, and that should be dealt with quickly. So, 2 questions. When are we going to see the non-labor contracts, and when are the disclosures going to be updated?
As far as the disclosures, I actually have Pam Alvino, the personnel director. She's up like after us here. I believe that that's the best place that should handle them and hold them, if you will. It's not only employees either, it's all the boards and commissions. Because I know that whenever I appoint someone to a board, a commission, I won't do anything until I have not only the disclosure, but a resume or some kind of actual background stuff so that I know, you know, what they're doing and what would be good. And so we are in the process. I know I've spoken to Pam briefly about it, and being in personnel, I think that for City Hall and all of the employees, that if we send it out, and they, quite frankly, it really only takes 5 minutes to fill out, so it shouldn't be a whole big ordeal. There shouldn't be a reason for anybody holding on to it for a week or 2, even as far as I'm concerned, unless they're on vacation. So I agree with you 100%. That needs to be done and completely filled out. And I will tell you this, that when this council did convene, I made sure that everybody had a charter. In the charter was a copy of the ethics code, and I gave everybody an ethics form to fill out and told them to return it to personnel.
And the non-labor contracts?
I don't know what non-labor contracts these are, so without checking with somebody, because I know Lee Tarrant's sitting across from me and he doesn't know, so I don't know what 7 non-labor contracts we are talking about was,
Those are the ones on the agenda last.
Talking about the 7 that were on the agenda for last
The
week.
dump truck bodies.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what he's talking about.
And there was a question of why they hadn't been presented.
They had them.
Those ones, Mayor.
I don't know who creates the agenda. I'm not involved in who creates the agenda.
We create the agenda, OPM.
okay, so are they on?
And so we had a heavy agenda today, so.
Yeah, the question is that the last time we were told, one was directed to OPM. I understand, Attorney Kiernan, that the city doesn't set the agenda, but we were told last time that there were more contracts coming.
To come, yes.
And that is in your hands. And I was wondering what that was, because I'm assuming that council is in charge of making sure that that happens.
With his approval, a few weeks ago, the procurement director agreed to be the point person, since all contracts should be generated from the procurement director to make sure that we have proper procurement. That the procurement director would be the contact person for MARB, that when a contract is ready to be reviewed, that he would send it to MARB and know that all the boxes could be checked, that that contract has been properly put through every possible process, and then is in a position to be ready for signing. So the procurement director has agreed to accept that responsibility. I believe he's already been in contact with Julian on those issues, and he will continue to be. As we sit here now, I've given him 5 more contracts to review, so that process will continue.
Is Bob referring to the contract that was brought to our attention that
Yes.
$50,000 or more that
Yes.
never made it to the MARB?
Yes.
That was brought to your attention, is that what you're referring to? Because for, kind of lose sight of that fact, I think it's kind of important. And it just seems to me that that's what Bob is clearly referring to.
Okay.
And there were 7 that brought forth, but because at that time, they said the action was already taken, we went through them quickly, so that was done. Bob, I think you're referring to the additional contracts that have not been provided.
No, we didn't go through the 7 contracts. We may have gone through 1, but we said there wasn't enough time, and so I think those are still on our agenda. You know, really makes sense. I understand about today's.
We took care of action on the one that was already, that needed action to be reviewed. The old stuff we did not review.
Yes.
That, I understand. Okay.
So that was supposed to come before us at one point, wasn't it?
We just didn't re-put it on the agenda again. Right. And we can do that.
Okay,
But to my knowledge, there were more to come.
Yes.
So if you are charging the procurement director with doing this going forward, I believe there were some that they were still gathering to provide to us. Besides the 7, it was 7 plus. Julian, is that accurate? To your knowledge?
My knowledge,
Yes.
the individual that was taking a look back found those 7.
Oh, okay.
And was continuing to look back.
Okay.
When I checked back to see what the status was of that,
He was not
that
there.
was when I learned he was no longer with the city. So those were the 7 that were identified as having been executed before that December 29th or whatever the date was that he had shipped them up.
Okay.
But there is possibly, if someone were to take a look back, there may be others out there. I don't know that there are.
Okay.
The current procurement director is familiar with all 7, so he is in a position, should you want to discuss any of them, to articulate on those in the future.
All right, so what we'll do is we can also ask the auditors to bring it forth as they do their testing. Any other questions on the budget? I think that there's still some more work to be completed. We may have to have a special meeting to go over this, to try to get this through. Mayor, I think it's going to be important that we see a 5-year plan to be able to move on this, because we need to see how this year falls into the new years, as many of the items that Julian brought to our attention today are not in alignment with what the prior plan was. So they're, the funding that you had set aside for various update, additional money for ADEC, the fund balance, and if you're going to deviate from that, we will have to have a good conversation about that, because that's going to change things.
And also the raises, as I said, because that was another thing that, so again, yes, we have some more work to do on the budget. I do agree with that, and this way we can, and you're probably right, that we always seem to end up having a special meeting one way or another on the budget, because it just doesn't fall into the same time frame as, with the council and all of that. But yes, no, I do realize that. I do want to get the budget done though first, because again, that's your first year, and so it's kind of hard to finish a 5-year plan if you don't have your first year in place.
Understand?
Kim, quickly?
Yes.
It's Mark.
Mark, yes.
If the chief is still there, I just want to call his attention, if you need to have a reference to what Pat and I were talking about. Exhibit C, which gives the annual rate increases and the FTEs, those numbers are inaccurate based on your understanding of what was negotiated. And also page 10 of the existing contract reflects that, which is inaccurate based on what you have stated, which is that it was the 2.5% first, then the 10,000. And if you look at Exhibit C, I know you don't have it in front of you, it may be that, unfortunately, whoever did this or however it was done, it says with $10,000 plus 2.5% increase, when it should be 2.5% increase plus $10,000, which I believe, Chief, you are saying is the accurate representation. Unfortunately, it doesn't line up with what's given to us and also what exists in the contract proposed CBA. So I just wanted to call your attention to the areas where that needs to be adjusted, okay?
Thank you, sir. As usual, I really wasn't aware of the final product, just the horse work to get it there, so. But
Yeah,
thank you.
I understand. Thank you.
All right. We are running out of time, but I don't know if you want to take a few minutes. We have no more questions about the budget at this very moment, or other questions that we need to bring to the mayor, because this is the most important thing, or Mr. Jackson. Okay. If we can quickly touch upon maybe the positions, unless folks have to leave, and the personnel plan.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over, I'll have Pam sit here, and she's already got her spreadsheets ready, so this way she can answer the questions.
Good morning. Good to be with you this morning.
Could you just put the highlights of the changes since the last time you gave us an update?
Sure, I will do that, beginning with the strategic plan on the first page with regard with respect to the restructuring.
This is the ones I have to sign on this. This is the reimbursement.
For payroll specialist, which was a new position. I presented to the council along with the new proposed position for the organizational development specialist. Commentary here, going back to the human resources generalist position that was already incorporated within the budget, that still remains unfilled.
That's what you say.
And we are actually going to proceed down the road of engaging a staffing firm to assist with that. And this is due basically across the board to falling interest in outside talent out there applying to our jobs through Indeed or other job postings. So we have to take some measures, and that's one avenue to go down, which I believe that's.
It says print here, so is it over here, right? Okay.
The other items that are updated would be in bold, and moving on to, under the labor relations strategic plan section B, we continue to utilize ADP and the technology that provides, and the robustness of the portals available to us. It's just a matter of, frankly, and I think my overarching comment here is that the numerous items, initiatives, and plans really hinge on the ability to fill my open positions in the department. There's, as it was identified through MARB, there's insufficient staffing when you look at what the aggressive plan is for fully developing human resources and labor relations. So these positions are critical. For now, I utilize my staff in ways that I could and have to adhere to contractual requirements. So I very much hope that we can move on some of these additional positions as proposed in my plan.
We support you in that endeavor, as well as the plan that you put forth. Please keep in mind, I guess, that there's always been a delay in getting people on board. So that you want to make sure that you take into consideration in your timelines.
And that makes every day increasingly challenging for me and my staff. So
yeah,
hoping for a miracle in some respects. If there aren't any more questions regarding that, I'll go to the staffing plan. Recruiting, that's the recruiting activity throughout the organization, and while we have made progress in filling a number of key positions, unfortunately we had the resignation of our assistant finance director early in last March. Graciously, he has agreed to stay on board with us as a temporary employee for a couple days a week as we continue to very aggressively try to source out a replacement for him. With the procurement director coming on recently, he and I are working with staffing his positions. We have started conducting interviews internally. We will probably look outside of the organization for his buyer or specialist position. Kind of undecided as to whether we can move internally with the admin position, but it's given all the attention it needs to staff his department and work on what he needs to accomplish. There are other problematic positions that haven't been filled. The assistant building official, which is going to be and has been redefined as now inspection positions. So the union has signed off on the modified position, and we will be looking outside to fill that. I think it might be an easier task than finding any ABOs in the outside of the organization. And housing specialist is still not filled. Interviews have been here and there, but there hasn't been an overwhelming response to those ongoing postings.
Okay.
And that's, I could say, across the board to all our postings. It's really just a trickle.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for your good work.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Scott, corrective action plan?
So you do have documents in front of you. I try to add a little bit of additional clarity to it. While nothing has been closed, I have moved some items to pending based upon acceleration of action. So just quickly running through it. accounts payable item was closed, but I didn't modify the comments. Anything I modified is different from what you saw before, and so I initialed it. I did want to talk a little bit about the purchase order process and the closing out of the year. So I'm going to give the department heads no more than 45 days at close of year to run around and get their invoices in. Otherwise, the invoice or the POs will be liquidated. And I'll give 30 to 60 days on any other purchase order that's outstanding. Cash controls, that hasn't changed. Purchasing, shipping, and receipts. Are you going to go to Mr. Fryer on this? Are you going to talk about purchasing with Mr. Fryer? Because I'll leave that to him.
I just want to briefly do an overview, but if you'd like to introduce him, then that would be helpful, and just for a quick wrap up.
Okay. The important thing on purchasing, as far as I can see, the high level thing is we've been talking about munis training for a long time. On Friday, March 29th, we will have our first round of munis training. Mr. Spryer is working very closely with the coordinators from munis to determine the curriculum and who's involved. So if you like, I'll turn it over to Mr. Spryer to talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
I think you need to say April 29th, Mr. Jackson.
April 29th, right?
This Friday.
This Friday.
Yes.
I thought it was this Friday. Mr. Spryer?
Hi, how are you?
Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Nice to meet you, and welcome to the city of West Haven.
I'm a lifelong resident, so I'm well aware of West Haven. So just a little background, I was the Director of Procurement in Newtown before I came here to West Haven. I think we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I think that we're on the right path and bringing the right people in to make sure that this is done correctly. So just a quick overview of the initiative plan, the action plan you guys supplied with us. The purchasing and procedures manual, our procurement consultant and I are just going to renew that once more, just so that I can get my approval on all of her work, and then we will be ready to go with that. It'll be distributed to department heads. As Scott mentioned, munis training has been scheduled for this Friday, along with 12 additional days of training to be used over the next 12 calendar months. I'll be working with a curriculum advisor from Tyler, John Gillis, to develop a structured curriculum to train the appropriate staff in appropriate topics, and that should happen over the next 2 to 3 weeks. They are booked up for training 6 weeks out, so we won't start any training for at least another 6 weeks, but it gives us time to adequately set a curriculum for that. As Pam mentioned, we're doing some interviews for my department, admin, buyer positions have not been interviewed yet, and then we're working on some approval workflows through Munis from requisition to purchase order. But that's just a quick overview. I know we don't have much time. I just want to give a quick overview, and if anyone had any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Mr. Squire, I hope that,
Squire, sorry.
I'm glad to hear that you're going to be looking at the purchasing manual yourself and putting your stamp of approval on that, and not that I will discount the part-time help that they had, because she did a very good job, but you're going to be the permanent director, so I think it would be great if you do put your hand stamp on that. In addition, while the staffing is listed as this board had recommended, as well as others, and that's just some of us who have overseen procurement in the past, you are the expert if you feel that one of those positions that's been listed, I questioned whether you needed an admin or not, or whether you needed another buyer. So I would want you to make sure that you get the proper staffing that you need for your department.
Great. Yeah, I think right now, an admin is probably the most immediate need. The buyer, until we get munis training, staff-wide, department-wise, building, throughout the building, and we develop our processes and begin to actually implement these processes, bringing a buyer in right now would just be doing that just for the sake of doing it. There's not enough work to support a buyer position at this time. I don't want to hire someone just to the sake of hire someone right now.
Sure. One thing that I was envisioning is that the buyer position would also possibly run or oversee a P-card program, because we had some issues with the credit cards.
So our P-card program, our application for a P-card program is complete. I spoke with Lori from Webster Bank this morning. They should be getting back to me today or tomorrow with the next steps. We've put together a tentative policy manual for P-cards that'll be approved through the mayor and Scott and myself and anyone else the mayor thinks needs to have some input, and Lee, I'm sure, Corporation Council. So that is moving forward. We should have that implemented within the next 3 to 4 weeks. We should have that implemented.
You should share that with this board, because the last the last credit card policy that we saw was very weak and did not have all the proper reviews and controls built into it. So I think you should share that.
I'll send that to Julian. I'll send the draft to Julian. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from the members? Or anything else you'd like to share?
I'm good.
Okay. I think we are too.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Look forward to working with you.
We're looking forward to having you on board.
Thanks.
Ms. Dennison,
Yes.
I just want to quickly run through the rest of the list of the audit items.
Please do.
Bank reconciliations, I made one change to add the finance director to review of that, as our assistant finance director retired and we're in the process of replacing. The timesheets, we are learning how to better use ADP with every weekly payroll cycle, so that's working out nicely. The approved vendor list purchasing, we have a lot of duplicates. For example, a standard was to, if someone changed addresses, we created a new record for them, which makes it very hard to do requisitions and identify where you're directing it to, and so we're going to shrink that list. That's a big project on Mr. Sparks' plate, but that's where the admin can really be very useful. And then we spoke briefly earlier about the pension plans and the goal to create a consolidated board to hire a manager who identifies the funds and recommends on the allocations, but have it as a more structured process.
Thank you. You're talking our language. Most people, when we would talk that, they didn't even understand what Christine and I were talking about. But it's good to hear. Thank you.
So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions? Can I get a motion to adjourn? IT. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Stephen. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Bye now.
Bye, everyone. Have a good day.
You too.
You're killing me.
Yeah.